So here we are in 1835, fairly early in the game. I just finished an operating round, moving to a stock round. We only have one corporation on the board. Let me explain a couple of things that happened. Most of the progression is pretty standard. One thing we see is that the one company kind of dicked over the four company. They're in different people's hands, and unless they're working together, you often see something like this. There's a slight advantage for the one to get into here, perhaps, but the big thing is that they're hosing the four from getting into there, which may not be that big a deal at all, because by the time they could actually do anything with this, they probably have that. Okay. More important is what the Bears did, and it laid track up to Firth Nuremberg. It's very close to closing out the Ostpavillon. Not much the owner can do with that. The best he could do is, if he has a corporation, which he doesn't, he could play a tile to bone the Bayern, but it still is going to close as private, and that's a shame for him, but that's what happens. Okay, and it also bought a dot here, a token, at 20, 40, 60. You pay, it's like 1861, you pay by the distance, you don't, so getting dots far from where your home is hard. And he had a couple of trains last turn. I don't know, I forgot to put them out, but I paid for them. And he bought one more. Now, what he would have loved to do is some kind of exchange of trains with his own miner, the one. But he can't do that. And the reason he'd want to is he wants to make that company or that corporation less palatable for other people to steal from him. The reason he can't do that, and it's not covered in the rules, and this card is unfortunately in German, but luckily there's an English translation on the back of it's a playbook thing, and it tells you that, yeah, you can only sell between companies after the three train has been bought. I seem to remember having played that way. I just couldn't find a rule in the rule book, and my German is non-existent, basically, so there's no way I could figure that out. Alright, so we go to the stock round, and I'm pretty sure people have enough money to buy another share of Bayersh at this point, so the presidency is probably going to switch hands. So here we are, end of the stock round, back into the operating round. One thing we notice, all the Bavarians are gone, so the stock price goes up by a spot. What happened? The presidency did switch hands. There's a lot more money over there in it, because the other 40% just got sold. Presidency switched hands. First guy who had an opportunity to do anything bought a share. He now owns it. He has a company, a miner company, that he can use to work with it, so he'll be able to swap trains, etc. once that time comes. Everyone else who could bought shares. It's set up to be a real money maker. Everybody's in some danger. It could end up raped and ditched, but this is not a game where ditching companies is usually a good move, unless you have something to move to. And other people looked and decided they could not take the Saxon, or Sashish. So this poor guy was left with no real option other than to buy a certificate of it, which helps protect his investment. He's happy with that. But his railroad's going to get off to a slow start. I've seen sometimes where it starts up much earlier in the game. Okay, and we'll go to the operating round and collect money. Okay, I'm just about to go into the stock round. The Bavarian paid out, and I'll flip them just to remind me while I babble. So what happened that's of any interest in this turn? We didn't see people like the 2 Company who have the cash to buy a train, they don't have the track to use it. We didn't see them do that. We didn't see, I think, the 4s, the other company that's in a position. Now, they're oddly, they were $10 short. They had to buy a 2+2. They were $10 short. Now, that brought up the thing. At one point in the introduction, I mentioned, I think you can swallow with the miners. You can't. You have to pay 50-50. You have no other option in this game. 2038 is a little different. Okay. Over to the Bavarian under new ownership. Well, he did some dicky things. He placed here, paid 50 to place here, closing out the Osterbayas, which is why it's so cheap and kind of a deal, I suppose. Because when we compare it to this one, it seems like such a deal. Well, this one doesn't go away. It produces money continuously. So maybe that 120 isn't that great a deal. They also picked up a 2+2 train, and they're looking at getting into Fürth-Nürnberg because that's a double X. They can do that. All right, so now we go to the stock round, and some interesting things might start happening in the stock round at this point. Well, if this were any other game, they might. But all those got to sell first, so I guess nothing too interesting is going to happen. Well, this stock round was passing pretty normally, as far as I could tell, with everybody buying shares of Sashish. And it floats. But then this last player, who was holding 3 shares of the Bavarian, decides, with the chew here and the Bavarian, and kind of, I mean, it's almost out of money here. It's been running real hard, and thinks to himself, well, I'd rather own my company, and I can now. There's only 30% here. I can pick up a total of 40% and grab the presidency. So he dumped his Bavarians, and they're down to 100, and he's starting to buy up the Sashish. I don't know what that's going to mean for other people. We're going to kind of see where things fall, but certainly I think that was not a bad move on his part. Now this leads to an annoying situation again for me, because I'm used to the 1830 situation. This guy says, I don't want my Saxons if I can't hold it. I want Bayerisch, but he can't do it. He can't sell them because they were just floated this round. Even though he's not going to get to run it. It's just the number of restrictions that this game places on your ability to make choices is so painful. Sure, there was a huge choice made over here. But in a game of 1830, I feel like huge choices like that get made sometimes several times in a stock round, or at the very least every couple stock rounds, at least one is being made. Here, this is the first one. It really is. I mean, this one, there was no thought there. But this one, switching to grab control of someone else's company when you have high-performing stocks, I mean, this one, he didn't have a choice. He had to buy shares. It was, do I float some other guy's company, or do I keep buying stuff that's doing well and take it over? There's not a lot of thinking there. But here, there certainly was. He's giving up income production in exchange for his own corporation. Well, this guy would kind of like to give up his old company in exchange for the income production. It doesn't happen that way. So the Bayerisch is going to, because nobody has the capital, I guess people could sit around on cash. It's sort of like the initial stock round thing. Wait until somebody else gives you something. Well, to me, that's not the way 18XX. It's not what draws me to XX. It's not the, I hope somebody hands me a bonus. It's, I'm trying to manipulate things to get that bonus. Well, in this case, the manipulation is just too much. To make sure that I had the right position, it had to be. I'd have to be in control of everyone's money. Now, I know that because of where I sit in a solitaire game. But in a normal game, I'm not going to know exactly how many shares are going to fall before it comes to me. That's just a little too hard. Knowing whether or not one of three companies will be able to buy a train is a little easier to keep track of. So, for me, the ability to control the game with the stock market in this, which may exist, is just well beyond my abilities. And frankly, I don't think I've seen anybody do it. But I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just too clueless to have noticed. Alright, I guess I'll continue with his purchases. Okay, so here we are at the end of that operating round. And what happened? Well, Bavarian managed to pay out some 18 a share. It's got an extra train on it, but I had kind of wanted that, otherwise I couldn't get this. But I figure eventually it will be able to expand, maybe, kind of. What's really cool about that 18 a share is some of it's going into the company treasury, because nobody was allowed to buy any of it. They were unable to sell the Saxon shares that they had. Speaking of the Saxon, well, of course it went back, because it's its first operating round. So everybody who bought shares of it lost money. That's just the case. I mean, that's pretty standard, except usually in an XX game, you don't have everybody in the world buying a share of something that just starts. Usually the person who's starting it is funding it almost entirely. But it made an interesting choice. It laid its 2 track tiles, and it only bought a 2+2 train, with the thought that it's going to hit something like this. And the main reason is it doesn't want a second 2+2 train. And the 3 train doesn't terribly want that. It might buy it, but it doesn't really desire it. It did not want the 3 trains coming out because it wants 2 track lays to get into Dresden. And then once it hits there, it's going to want greens, so it'll probably buy another train at that point to get it into the Nuremberg area or whatever. So we're going to be walking over in the stock round to this guy, who probably has enough money to open up buying the Badish. Once he does that, it does make some things a little more interesting. It'll bring the Prussian shares into play. Otherwise, nobody could do anything until he floats the Badish. Very soon we're going to hit that position, though. And that's another one of the freezing points. Oh, look. You can either not invest your money or invest it in the thing somebody's trying to start right now. There's just so many things about this game that I really don't find particularly enjoyable. Components are good. I think when we used to play it, as soon as the president's certificate went, the next company would come up. But that is not how it's defined in the rules. I think even the guy who always brought this game, and we ended up agreeing on it as some sort of compromise between crayon rails and something that I would call a wimp game, something like Pax Britannica or something. We would end up playing this every damn week, and I think even he tweaked that rule. But the whole game is just so channeled. I think you could play with it and make a better game out of it, but there are so many good XX games out there. Alright, I'm going to send this one up.